was following the pack, all swallowed in their coats, with scarves of red tied round their throats, to keep their little heads from falling in the snow. And I turned around, and there you go, and Michael, you would fall, and turn the white snow red as strawberries in the summertime. Thank you again for having us. We were asked by Mr. Briggs to be here, and we are very grateful to have this opportunity. He did also ask that we would finish with the national anthem. This is something that we've been working on regularly. My whole Glee Club and myself plans on attending a New Hampshire Fisher Cats game where we will sing the national anthem before the start of a Saturday Fisher Cats game. So it's really exciting. So if you wouldn't mind, please standing. Feel free to sing along. And the flag is up here on the stage. Thank you. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red flare, the bells bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone to Budget and Candidates Night, which kicks off the 8-day period that will conclude with our voting day on March 1st. I want to thank the other members of the Town and School Meeting Committee for their help in getting things set up this year, Dave Briggs and Bill Mann. We're looking for a couple more people to join, so if you are interested, please come and see me this evening. The town will be starting, followed by the school, and then we'll have the candidates, and then we'll have a wide open Q&A session. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you our town moderator, Judge Michael Kanan.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for attending. We will start off with the school budget, as Mr. Flynn has suggested. After the school budget, if there's some time following that presentation, we'll have questions directly related to the school budget. That'll be followed by the town budget presentation. Again, if there's time left, we can have questions directly related to that presentation. There will be additional time after the candidates speak to ask questions about both budgets. So if you haven't been able to ask your question during the time we've allotted for the school or the town budget, you'll have a further opportunity. Without further ado, I'd like to recognize Lori Dickerson, Chair of the School Board, to talk to us, and Superintendent DeBalzi to talk to us. No? Okay. Talk to us about the school budget.
So you see this pen right here?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can do a little red dot.
Oh, okay.
Okay, just go forward and back.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I've given this presentation once, and then I asked the balance of my board, I said, okay, what do I need to change to explain myself further? And they've come back with and said, you talk enough through the presentation, even though, because I don't necessarily read the slides, I talk a lot. So they think I'm giving you the information that you need. So I titled this, the Hartford School Budget, Finding a Number in a Sea of Continually Moving Variables, and that is what it is. And if you follow what goes on in the paper and the state legislature, especially this year has been more problematic than ever, and it was mainly due to, Act 46, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But what I want to go through is some differences, the high-level view of what's going on. So what we have here is the revenues, and then what you'll see on my next slide is the expenses, and it's a balance sheet, so they're going to balance. But I just want to speak a little bit about what's going on here. Our fiscal year 16 approved revenues versus the proposed revenues. And if you will notice that number of the proposed budget, the $27,259,573 is less than what we had approved last year. So we've cut the budget. Then our collaborative programs, we have four, for those of you in the audience who don't know, we have 4 collaborative programs that we here in the district run, but there are sending schools throughout the Upper Valley, including New Hampshire, that come. The HACTC, whose logo is here on this podium, which is our tech center, is, I believe, the largest of them. And then we have an autistic program, we have the regional resource program for our special needs students, and we also have the alternative program, where those students that have emotional, difficulties that they can't be in a regular classroom. They have difficulties, so they are in this special program, and that program is always full. So you can see that in the collaborative programs, the proposed revenues of that is up. And basically, our collaborative programs, how they work is that, as I said, they're a sending district. I mean, we are the receiving, place for them, and we have sending districts that send to us. So this number, the variable on this, really depends on how many Hartford students are in attendance of these programs, because we pay the same tuition rate, even though we're hosting this, that every other school does. So if we have given our tech center, if they're at maximum and we're sending 10 less students to that, we have, we'll get more revenue in that revenue line, because other schools, hopefully, that's the goal, is that we'll fill in those slots. And we've been doing very well in the tech center. And that works the same way with all of those collaborative programs. You will notice that the federal state grant revenue is down, and that is a sign of the times. I can testify to that. I work for the Dartmouth Medical School, and their federal grants are down. And then the food service is budgeted at the same amount. So as you can see, for the total revenues, the proposed revenues are down from what had been proposed, had been approved for the fiscal year 16. Okay, here we go. And the expenditures is the same, it's just going to match as far as the revenue side. That's just how the balance sheet works. So let's get into a little bit more here. The challenges of budgeting for fiscal year 17. Here again, we have Act 46, which was designed, I want to start off this tonight by saying Act 46 was designed because of the outcry throughout the state that when you're having less students to educate, how can the cost be going up astronomically? And so this was the state trying to come up with a solution to that problem. And along the way, I think it was very admirable of, what the problem that they're tackling, because the problem that they're tackling is huge. But there's some hiccups along the way. So part of when the Act 46, they initiated penalties so that to try to rein in all of the town's budgets, to make sure that you didn't go over what they had. We call it a cap, but it's an allowable growth rate. So, and one of those penalties that was in Act 46, it was a double taxation for the portions of the budget that went over the allowable cap. And I say that because that was very much on our minds when we were putting together this budget. We know that we need to, fund our schools. We have to educate students. We have to educate students across the state. We understand that. But we certainly didn't want to come up against something where we put in a budget and then our Hartford taxpayers pay double tax on that. So that was key in formulating this budget. Another challenge in this budgeting process was the Agency of Education interpretation of Act 46 was found not to be in line with the legislative intent. And this was discovered sort of in the 11th hour as far as our superintendent and financial director, they get, the law is written, and then we go to the Agency of Education and say, okay, this is what the law says, but what does that really mean to us and how do we budget accordingly? And we get guidance. And in part of that guidance, there was some misinterpretation of the law. And it was really at the 11th hour when, some of the towns, when they were putting together their budgets, and they said, well, this shouldn't be allowed, or this should be allowed. And one of it was the capital expenditure interest that, they had to address. Another thing was that the state legislature, because everyone was putting their budgets together and coming up against this cap and not being able to even address the slightest changes in their budget, there was outcry throughout the state. And so the legislature, when they came back into session, they knew that they had to adopt some of it. Well, unfortunately for us, we were coming up against a deadline of the warrant for the budget that we had to present had to be, it had to be signed, it had to be on, to the printer and everything else. So we were up against a deadline. So we took a vote and we decided that we were going to present the budget that you have in your books. That's what you see. Well, it was literally after midnight when the legislature, they had, worked it out between the Senate and the representatives and everything else. Well, part of those numbers have changed. And so therefore, our budget remains the same, but your tax rate will not be as high as what is printed in your books. So the other thing that I want to just talk about as far as challenges is the decrease in the number of Hartford equalized pupils. We're down 54 equalized pupils, which is huge when we send all of our money, to the state, so that they can, parse it out among the states so that everyone in the state gets an equal opportunity at education, and then they give it back to us according to all of these little formulas. And it's in your book, and I have to give our financial director, Mr. Vizina, credit in the fact that he has his notes along the side of how those numbers are calculated, because in years past, I used to go back and go through the numbers and say, well, I don't understand what you're multiplying to what to get this number. And he has a little cheat sheet in there, or cheat column, so that you can understand that. So that's devastating to our budget. Oops, went too far. So the notable changes that we have in our budget are we have a state mandated, as far as things that we can control or things that we can't control, but our difference as far as, one year over the other. Before I say that, I want to say, when the budget, when you go through the first iterations of the budget and everything else, you plug in the numbers that you know, and things change along the way, when the state comes out with this number or that number that you have to apply. And we came in and we were at 11.9% increase for our taxes. That was the initial, okay, this is just, what we'd like to have, what we know we have as far as some of our costs that are going up that we know, contracts that we have already signed. We don't have our teachers' HEA association signed yet, but our other two associations, we do have signed contracts. So we had to plug, those are known numbers for us, and we plugged those in. So like I said, then we were looking at 11.9%, and we can't do that, and we know that. And that was really going to, put us into double taxation. So that's when we, as a board, go to Mr. DeBalzi, our superintendent, and our financial director, and say, come in at a number where we think, a 3% increase is reasonable because of these notable changes. So the first one is the state mandated on-site athletic trainer for concussions to the tune of $50,000. That's state mandated, but they're not really necessarily giving us extra money for that. But that's in our budget. That was not in our budget before. Our healthcare premiums this year, which have been very good over years and years. I mean, it's through the state of Vermont, and it's all of the school boards across, and superintendents also, that are into this pool. And we've been very blessed that it hasn't been huge increases. This year we got hit. We have a 7.9% increase for this year. So that's without changing anything. And then the other thing that I wanted to note is that the special education admin, there's a line in there that's up $50,000. We don't have to have a new person in there, but that was just a reallocation. Again, when I had spoken to you about, the collaboratives, well, we had a student or students in collaboratives that needed our services of our special educators. That student or students have moved on and they're no longer needed there, so we have to reabsorb, since that service is no longer needed there, we have to reabsorb that back into our budget. So that's why there's an increase on that line. So, space bar? Okay, bottom line. So the proposed budget for fiscal year 2017 is $215,021 less than the 2016 budget. The percent increase in the tax rate right now, and there's a little asterisk or a little star here, is at 1.5% due to the last-minute legislative rule changes, down from the 3% increase that's published in the report that we had directed our administrators to aim for. The budget still contains, in order to get to that bottom line, contains $1,114,000 decrease in expenditures in comparison to fiscal year 2016. So everybody's going to say, well, how can you cut $1 million from the budget? Well, right now, we have 11 retirement people who have declared, they have to declare, I think it's in the fall, that they're planning on retiring. And we have 11 people that have declared that they were going to retire. So we're looking at, since 80% of our budget is people, is salaries and fringe and all those benefits, we are going to look at that very closely, or I should say, Mr. DeBalzi and his team is going to look at that very closely to see which of those teachers are we not going to, positions are we going to rehire? Who can we shift around with the people that we already have to fill those spaces, and only fill those spaces that we absolutely have to. Because we still are addressing the fact that we are down the number of equalized pupils that we are. So, I guess that's, all I have, so I guess I'm willing to take any questions that you have. I don't know where I'm running on time, but
Couple of minutes.
Couple of minutes.
Questions on the
we can have a few questions if you have any for me.
Quick one. So the
Come on.
Come on, folks, we're making a TV show. I want everybody to use the mic.
round, so the 11 teachers that are retiring, they do not need to be replaced?
No, I didn't, I guess I didn't say that clearly enough. We're going to look at who needs to, what positions they held, and then see if we can sort of reorganize within those schools or within those programs to see, okay, maybe we can do, instead of having 5 teachers in this section, maybe we only have 4 now. Or if we have to move somebody from another section, that's how we're going to do it. We will have to replace some, but that's where our biggest cuts are going to, our biggest savings are going to come.
Since we only, my name is
You want to
Jeff
identify
Arnold.
yourself?
Jeff Arnold, Hartford resident. Since we're only going to be paying a 1.5%, why not go for the 3% and not cut so many teachers?
Because, Mr. Arnold, what we do is we vote on a budget number. And we had to have, in order to have the warrants, signed and everything in due process for the way it has to be done, we had to have a budget number. And it was after we had decided that number that the legislature came back in a late session and changed the rules, because we were following all of the rules.
Okay, why don't you suggest that the town people vote that down so that you can save some teachers' jobs?
Well, I'm
And-
not going
and-
to do that, because I think...
Because wouldn't you like to say, 11 teachers is almost...
Well, there's also other savings, Mr. Arnold, but I just think we
Right.
definitely need to address the fact that we have less students that we are educating. So that needs to be addressed, and we want to make sure that we're giving the best education we can for everybody. But I think that is an area that we can adjust some.
Well, we cut 24 a couple of years ago, so I think we must be down to bare bones. Next year, for FY18, there's going to be I know, just a second, I haven't finished it. I haven't finished my first. So in FY18, there's going to be another huge drop in enrollment because the junior class is 185 right now, and the incoming kindergarten classes are around 130. So you're expecting another drop in 55 and another drop in $1 million. What are your plans for the future?
Well, frankly, right now, we're still waiting for the legislature to come back with, because they're still unsettled. We still don't know, as far as the Agency of Education, what the final numbers as far as, that's why there was that little star there to say, it's right now, it's proposed that it's going to be a 1.5% increase, but you'll know when everything sugars off what your tax increase will be. Yes, that is a challenge, Mr. Arnold, that we face, that, with the number of pupils that are dropping. It's going to be harder going forward. There is no question about that. But I think we have to also take, since our budget is state-driven as far as how we, how our tax rates and everything else is affected, I think we have to take some guidance from them on this and follow the rules. Is there any other questions?
Lori, thank you. Excellent presentation, and you actually have, like 10 minutes of time to take more specific questions about the school budget. So I'll ask one. What can you say to us about the big disparity that exists between how much the school district spends and how much we actually pay in taxes here in town? Because we always see in the newspaper that the school budget's, $36 million. But when you multiply the tax rate by the grand list, the amount of school education taxes that are being paid in town are more like 16 or 17 million. So there's, 15, 16, 17, 18 million dollars that's coming into the school district from other sources. And it's also true that of that 17 or 18 million dollars that is being paid in town, for over 2/3 of homeowner residents, they're not paying the full tax bill because it's abated as part of your income taxes. It's capped at that, 2.4, whatever the percentage works out to. So the question I have is how does the school board, balance that reality against the big headline that says $36 million that I think drives everybody crazy?
Well, I think I had hoped, on my first line to talk about the collaboratives, because that's a huge part of our budget. That's, that balances out, and that's really, we have a portion of that, but we don't have the whole part of that. The 27 million, that's the part of the budget that really is with us. As far as what we send the state and what the state sends back to us, I can't speak to it to articulate it as clearly as what you would need to understand, because it's just so convoluted as far as the percentages, and they change constantly as far as everybody is tweaking this and that. So if you look at the schedule for equalized, spending for equalized students, we fall in, right where we want to, as far as like for the size of our school and everything else like that. But I guess I would have to have Mr. DeBalzi or Mr. Venzina speak to that.
Yeah, that's fine about the specifics, but it was really more, when you're sitting there on the school board, there is that reality in the background, and there's a certain, leadership that I think that the school board could exercise in helping people to understand that in many ways, their dollar in taxes is being effectively doubled, or in cases where people are strongly income sensitized, tripled or even quadrupled. And just an observation. Are there, anybody else have a specific question?
Mike Salsa Wilder. You stated that the teachers, they've not been working with a contract. Now, technically, this is the second budget cycle. Going back to last year, the new contract was supposed to take place July 1st.
Mm-hmm.
They've been working faithfully since day one. They walk through the doors every day, educating the students of this community.
Yes, they do.
Yet, you state you have the budget here, but the teachers are still working without a contract. Is this going to be affected if their needs aren't met? Are we going to be facing a Burlington situation where teachers go out on strike because the contract is not ratified?
Well, I can't answer that. I don't have a crystal ball, Michael. But I can tell you this, that we tried very hard to move the process along last winter. We reached impasse in February. And we had reached impasse also with the support staff. And the support staff came, a mediator was found very quickly, and we anticipated that would be the same, and it wasn't. And we had to have our attorney contact the UNISERV representative for our teachers union several times before we found a mediator. And of course, once you find somebody, Then it takes time to schedule a meeting. First of all, you have to find a mediator that is agreeable to both parties. So that happened in the end of April, and we got a date for mediation that was set. The HEA gave us one day that they could meet, and it happened to be a day that it was a school board night. And the school board, who wanted to move this process along as quickly as we could, said, okay, we'll delay our board meeting, and yes, we will meet with you. And it turned out that our mediator had to cancel because his wife required surgery. So then we go back to the drawing board as far as trying to get another date. And then it's the end of school, and, trying to find dates there. And we knew we didn't want to go into the summer, because then you can never find a date because of everybody's vacation schedules, which proved true. We found a date. It was, I think it was in early July, but that didn't work out. And then, so the next date that we had was at the end of August because of all the vacation schedules. So we were all agreeable, we were ready to roll, and then the teachers came back to us and said, nope, that's start of school, we have to delay. Would you please delay? So we said, yes, we will delay, and then we had met with mediation at the end of September. That was not fruitful, unfortunately. And now we're finally, I can report as of right now, we have a date for fact-finding as of March 29th. So that's when we're going to fact-finding. But I would like to make something perfectly clear as far as the teachers working without a contract. Every teacher who has worked here, yes, they are showing up, and we are very thankful for that. But they're also getting paid, and they're also, if they have a sick day, they're getting paid for that sick day. And those teachers that were on the steps that moved, that were due to move in a step, they got those increases. And if anybody has, like I said, a sick day or bereavement, so even though they're working without an official signed contract, they are working as if there was a signed contract, except for the people basically on the highest step. There are some issues that we had worked out as far as TA'd, tentatively agreed. But we have other issues that we have to work out, and we're hoping that the fact that the inflation in the state and overall is zero. Actually, I just got on the state website today, and as far as for the teachers' retirement, their COLA increase is 0% for next year, 0%, because there was no increase. So, we're trying to hold the line. Yes, we have increases that are budgeted, both this past year that was approved. There is an increase there. There's an increase in this budget here. But we're asking, we're hoping that there is some movement, and a successful contract will be reached.
So basically what you're saying, that there is budgeted in this for any negotiations that may take place?
We have a figure in here. So yes, there is, it's figured in. We have an increase figured into this budget. We had an increase figured into, the current budget. Yes, there is an increase there for them. And we're just hoping that, we can meet at that, a reasonable amount right in there.
So the increase from last year's budget, where is that standing now?
It's sitting in the budget.
So there's a surplus per se, or no?
No, it's because when we settle this contract, we'll go back to July 1st. It's not been in our history that we've, settled a contract, and if we settle it in, May, that we say, okay, you get your increase from May to June, and you don't get it back from July. No, we don't do that.
But aren't there contracts good for 2 years?
The contracts are as good as the negotiations determines. So we go in and we say we want to negotiate for 2 years or 3 years or 1 year, or however many it works out to be. So, that's all done in the negotiation phase where, you decide up front and both sides agree to it.
Okay.
Okay? Yes?
President, I'll try to make this brief. I think it's fair to say that education in the state of Vermont, if it's not in a crisis, because I think we overuse that phrase crisis, it's certainly facing a number of challenges. And I think you find districts throughout the state going through the same exact challenges that we're all hearing here tonight. So my question is, given that, and we've got declining enrollments, we've got a state budgeting process that's a little rickety, we've got the Act 46 and so on. One of the lesser known functions of school board can be to advocate for the Hartford School District at the state level. So I'm just wondering, is the board or the superintendent trying to coordinate with other, because I think there's opportunities here, right, as well, to advocate strongly before the state for some change, maybe some fundamental changes in how we fund education across the state. So, I mean, are there efforts underway? And I would just, I'm sure that there are, I would encourage that down the line over the next few years.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Christie, who is one of our board members, is in the legislature. And as far as in this process, Mr. DeBalzi and Mr. Vizina submitted numbers to the legislature as far as what Act 46 was going to do, to our budget and to our programs. So yes, we're very much active on the state level as far as trying to, influence and explain, this is the rule that you came up with, but this is when it comes down to, where the rubber meets the road. This is what's happening. So yes, thank you for that question. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Go through a change in computer. We're going to do a change in computer and then invite up Mr. Dennis and Ms. White to do the presentation for the Board of Selectmen.
Oh, you had it though, right?
Yeah, I did. I just accidentally closed it.
Okay, good. Well, while we're getting booted up here, I'll just say great to see everybody came out, big crowd tonight. And my name is Simon Dennis, and I serve on the select board. And I'm going to be presenting tonight with.
I'm Becca White.
And we are going to walk you through some of the aspects of our fiscal year 2016-2017 budget. And so there's quite a few things that we're very proud of about this budget, and none the least of which we have a $0 allocation from the unassigned fund balance, and this is down from all-time high transfer of $375,000 from last year, you may recall. This is very important because our reserve funds are getting low, so that's one very positive thing about the budget. Additionally, we have restored some personnel in needed places. We're going to talk a little bit about that, including personnel for 3 positions within public safety and 1 in public works and 1 in the Parks and Recreation. And all of this was gone on while really tightening the belt of the budget overall and maintaining the current levels of services. So we haven't cut anything major out of the budget, cut anything major out of the services provided. The one thing we want to keep in mind as you're listening to this presentation is that there is still work to be done on this budget that did not get accomplished, and one of those areas has to do with the capital improvement plan that continues to be underfunded. This is money that we set aside for projects that we know we are going to have to do in the future. For 4 years now, these projects have gone relatively underfunded. This year, even we went to unfunded, we have an unfunded mile, so to speak, which is we took money out of the capital improvement plan within the Public Works budget to fund one last mile of paving. Okay, so we have this, the total budget is $16,401,000, just a little bit over that, and that gets divided up here into 9 different categories, and you can see here that the police department, fire department, emergency, and dispatch represents 40% of the budget overall, and also major category, public works, taking care of roads and water, about 20% of the budget, and just behind that is capital improvements. Capital improvements is primarily paying back some of the bonds that we took out, some of the loans that we have to pay back for the improvements to the recreation facilities and also the town hall and that sort of thing. General government includes a bunch of different things, including the administrative, fiscal management, the information technology, clerk's office, elections, all of that sort of thing. And you can see in that planning and development in the smallest wedge, just under $500,000. Parks and recreation this year, just above $1 million. This is the department that probably grew the most this year. So that's we're going to talk a little bit more in specific about these particular departments.
Yeah, so I'm going to go through a little bit on each department in the town of Hartford and talk a little bit about what we're doing in each department. So Public Works, which is the folks that plow our roads, we see that we're restoring 1 employee, we're replacing 2 highway trucks, and just a clarification of that $360,000, $175 is paid from reserves, things that we've saved up. A big note here is the reduction in the paving budget, which we are approximately going to be paving 5 miles instead of the originally proposed 6. So that's one big budget savings, but something that isn't necessarily a sustainable long-term choice for us to make. Proposed public safety budget. It restores 1 dispatcher, 1 police officer, and 1 firefighter. For clarity, the 1 dispatcher is paid through fees. Another important factor in things that we added to public safety is funds needed for the police department for infrastructure. So you may walk into the police department, you may, if you do go to the public safety building, you may notice that you do have to be rung in, and there were some extremely important points that our new chief made on what types of infrastructure improvements we need to make that an accessible building and also a safe building. Another new addition I'd like to highlight is the portable radios. That's something that is greatly needed by our safety, by our police officers. It's the ability for them to communicate with one another as well as communicate regionally. So having updated and secure communication is key for their safety and for our community safety. Parks and Recreation. As you're probably aware, we added a beautiful field, the Max Field site, and if you haven't gone and seen it, you really should just drive by. It's beautiful. Well, because of that beautiful addition, we also have we are restoring 1 park laborer. And to be clear, of the 5 positions that are being added or restored, just for clarity, they're being restored. They're not new. We're looking at having those positions, 2 of those positions being phased in, which means that we won't actually be realizing the impact on our taxes as strongly this year as it's basically half divided between 2 years. As you can see, their budget increase is extremely small. Capital improvements. I think as Simon highlighted very eloquently, the fact of the matter is that our capital improvements is something that we have been struggling with as a community to continually fund at a sustainable rate, so we don't have infrastructure that isn't taken care of. A big one is police headquarters. It came up during our budget our budget workshops pretty prominently, the fact of the matter that is needed for the safety of securing individuals as well the safety of our officers, as well as the Queechee Pocket Park, as it's been described. And then we wanted to note something that was not funded, which I'm sure you've either read about or heard about, and that's Wright's Reservoir, something that we never actually were successful in funding, and ultimately, as you're aware, the dam broke, basically. So realized savings, this is the fun slide. We entered the health exchange, which means that we actually saw quite a bit of savings. We also did not have the same worker compensation request that we did, that we had originally budgeted. So we saw savings there. Gas prices are really low, and we were able to pre-purchase at a very good rate. So those are 3 big savings that we saw. Yeah, this is you.
Okay, so how does this relate with taxes? We are coming forward with a total revenue to raise. My apologies, I find out this number is not correct, of the total number of revenue that needs to be raised. The actual number is $12,628,360. Variation on that, but in any case, it's approximately up $500,000 from last year. And in order to raise this funds, we're raising the rate of the tax rate is going up to 0.9451, or you could say 94 cents per 100. You could also say $9.45 per $1,000 of assessed property value. And this represents a 3.4 cents increase from last year, or 3.6% increase. So I was thinking to myself, well, how big of an increase is this really, and in terms of the history of tax increases? So I want to show you a slide which depicts the 10-year history of tax increases for the town. So each one of these blue bars represents a percentage tax increase, and the first thing you might notice about this slide is that in 2008 we have a 35% decrease. This actually was not a real decrease. This was just due to the revaluation. So all of the properties were jogged up 35%, and as a result the tax rate got to jog down 35%, but actually everyone continued paying the same amount of taxes. Just to explain what's going on there. But if you subtract out that 2008 and you look at the 7 years between 2006 and 2013, the average tax rate increase by percentage was 4.1%. And then as you look forward and you see there's a bit of a rising in 2014, we're well above the average. 2015 we broke into new ground with an 8.58% tax increase, and 2016 is higher again. Now that actually is not the tax rate that was passed in 2016. As you recall, that budget was voted down, and instead we ended up with a tax rate of 6.57% increase. So you can see that in the recent 4 years we have a kind of an arc going on, and if we continue the proposed tax rate, which we're bringing forward for you in 2017, you'll see that it continues and to 3.6%. So the main point I want to make about this particular history is that the 3.6% tax rate is 20% lower than the 10-year historical average of tax increase. And it is 40% lower than the previous 4 years. If you average out the previous 4 years between 2013 and 2016, the average tax increase would be 6.1%. Here we are at 3.6%. So this is a case, you can put this roughly in the category of the voters spoke last year with the budget and the select board has listened to you.
Great. So I just wanted, one thing that we heard really loud and clear was, how does the change in budget actually affect my tax rate? So I wanted to break it down pretty simply. So based on a home value of $200,000, I wanted to put the average home value here. It's a little under, but still close. The annual household cost is right there. So then I tried to break it down by monthly cost. So that's how much with this proposed budget you would see, which is not a substantial change from the year before. So just, yeah.
Okay, so closing final thoughts for you to take away about the budget that we're bringing forward here. One headline you can say is that last year the voters spoke, this year the select board listened. The select board is very grateful to both the work of Stephen Locke and staff for creating a system of taking kind of cuts across the board. Everybody, all the departments are sharing the burden evenly to get down to that level, and that was, we were reported by Stephen that the department heads made his job easy, and he made our job easy, actually, all the way around. So that was just one example of the way in which our department heads and our staff have been collaborating and helping the town through this transitional period. The 3.6% tax increase is well below, 20% below the historical average, and we still have some work to be done. Which is to say, we're not out of the woods yet. We have tough choices to make in this next year. Some of the positions that have come online are not impacting this tax bill fully. Some of our capital improvements are not fully funded, and so we're still in a position where we need to be working hard and thinking hard about how to proceed.
So to conclude, we just ask for your support of this fiscal year budget. And one thing moving forward is we want to make sure that you as citizens and as taxpayers have the ability to tell us what your priorities are. So one of the steps that we're taking is a survey, a townwide survey. So for everyone in this room, if you get that survey, please fill out and take the survey, because one of the most difficult parts of as I've discovered since last year I was on this stage as a candidate, is we don't necessarily hear from you in critical times when we're making critical decisions. So having the ability to know what your priorities are helps us make decisions around the budget. So every chance you get to communicate with us as a board, please do. And I just want to personally say thank you to all of the board members that we have here tonight. And a particular shout out to our chair, Chuck Worcester, this is his last of these for this cycle. So just a really big thank you to him for all the time and all the dedication that the other board members have put into this. So thank you for listening, and
We're open to questions.
yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, I'll ask a question then. I'll get it started. The slide you had with the dramatic 34% drop in the tax rate in fiscal '08. Now, that was the year that the revaluation kicked in. And in point of fact,
Yeah.
the amount of taxes that town residents actually paid in 2008 was a couple $100,000, maybe $300,000 higher than in 2007. But the, the revaluation had dramatically shifted the rate. So that's a little bit deceiving. I think that if it would have been much better to do this showing both the increase in town spending and the increase in tax collections.
Thank you.
That would give you that would give a better picture.
Thank you
And
for
I think that's what that would show is that there's generally speaking in the previous years it was pretty well flat, but
Well, thank you.
No.
Thank you very much for that comment. Did you have a specific question?
yeah, I did. It calls into question, if you put this together and present it this way without taking something like that into effect, what else is getting missed? Because last year, when we went through the whole budget, when we got to town meeting after rejecting it, there were, a few $100,000 worth of errors or different ways of looking at things that were right there in the budget to take advantage of.
Well, first off, I just want to say thank you so much, FX, for putting this all together. And then I just want to respond with, the intention of the board is to do our best, and I think that that's a really helpful and constructive point of criticism, but just know that our intention is everyone on the board having full-time jobs. It was not to deceive you, but rather to provide information, and that feedback's helpful, and maybe Simon and I will retool this for Community Day, or maybe take it more into account.
I stand by the presentation.
Simon made the graph.
No, I mean, the point of this is to talk about percentage of tax rate increase, and I think that it depicts it, and I think we all can understand that 2008 is anomalous due to the revaluation.
I'd like, Jeff Arnold, Hartford resident. How much is budgeted for plowing? Do you know that number? And how much is expected in income or revenues from this baseball team that's coming?
That's a
Are
really
they
good
starting this
question.
summer or something like that?
Yeah.
And
So two questions. So first off, how much for plowing? So I don't know if there's a direct line item that has plowing full year. I'm looking to Rich, our Director of Public Works. So sorry to put you on the spot. Yeah, go ahead. And then for the baseball team, I think Dick is pretty big. Cool.
Sure.
Thank you, Rich.
In response to how much do we spend on plowing, plowing is part of our winter budget. We actually have two budgets to take us through the full year. We have 6 months we have a winter budget and then 6 months of summer budget. So it's difficult to say exactly how much we spend on plowing. Obviously, this winter we haven't spent as much, but
no, I mean, what is the budget for plowing?
the budget for plowing is the winter
I know.
maintenance
Right.
line item. If you want, we can take a look
Oh,
at
I
it.
just was curious, because
So
there might
just-
be a big savings there. I just wanted to know
So-
what the savings might be.
So that's
You're right about that.
945,000. Maybe what you're looking for is the actual overtime.
No, I was just wondering,
expenditure.
because we haven't had much snowfall, so it's $945,000 budgeted for plowing? No.
Jeff,
The whole thing is...
I think you're bringing forward an important point, and that is that we are saving money on plowing this year, and it's great.
It hasn't been calculated yet.
It's, and no, I mean,
I
in
guess
terms
not.
of how much we're saving exactly, so this
Yeah.
will, what happens is that when we budget for an expenditure and it does not actually get expended, so that money is there for us and hopefully will be there for us to help recharge the unassigned fund balance, which is now at dangerously low levels. So what the money we can save this year would be great. And we're anticipating that and very much looking forward to using some of the plowing and
Unassigned
salt.
fund balance, can that be used for Fairview Terrace and projects like that?
That's a great suggestion,
Or-
but I
or
actually
not.
think we should respond to your second question.
Right, baseball.
I don't know if Tad wanted to bring that forward, or Tad is the Director of Parks and Recreation.
The question was the Upper Valley Nighthawks.
I don't know what their name is.
Yeah, that's the name
Nighthawks?
of it, the
All
Upper
right.
Valley Nighthawks,
Go Nighthawks.
right? They'll be renting the Maxfield Sports Complex, and yes, they are paying per game, a rental fee agreement to which we have a overall agreement. There's many other aspects to that includes overtime pay when it's necessary, materials and supplies as necessary, the electrical aspect of keeping lights on for the evening.
It sounds like you're losing money already.
Losing money?
No, because you said, well, they have a rental fee, and then we got this cost and
No,
this cost.
no. They have that cost.
Oh, they have that cost. Oh,
Right. You
okay,
misunderstood me.
All
They
right,
are
all right.
reimbursing the town for those variable costs and fixed costs that they occur, but for them being there, we would not have had that cost. So at the end of the day, that cost can be reevaluated a year later to assure that we adjust it accordingly.
Thank you so
So,
much for your
well,
question,
did
Mr.
you
Arnold.
put-
I think there might be other folks who might have a question, or if you have a
I know, I wanted to know what the revenues were.
I don't know if you,
Expected revenues. Didn't you
Oh.
budget any revenues?
an exact number.
Well, there's a 10-year agreement that we have with this collegiate team. And they're one of 13 teams, the closest being in Keene and Montpelier. What they are, if you're familiar with the Cape League, that's where most of the pro teams go to find their talent. And this collegiate team is one step below that. What we did was entered into, and Tad will correct me, a 10-year contract with them. They're putting in, I think, 550 bleacher seats. They're putting in a concession stand. They're going to pay for the lights that are being installed down there, and they'll be our lights. Any improvements in the infrastructure there will be ours. And they're paying for, I believe it's almost $8,000 for the scoreboard. I mean, that's upfront capital investment by this team. It's a major investment in your property where we just spent $4.1 million down there. So the attendance for the games, I believe, will go towards the collegiate team. But I'm hoping and not knowing. There was a gentleman in town just talked to me about the Montpelier team, which is a very competitive team in the league. I believe they average 1,300 to 1,400 people a game. They're going to run, I believe, 6 weeks to 2 months, Ted? 25 games. And that will not interfere with their high school team, our Legion team, and they're also going to run baseball programs for our youth. They'll be involved, deeply involved in the community. So I think we're extremely fortunate to have them there and the investment that they're making in your property. So I think it's a win-win. They do, yep. And the gate proceeds, I don't think they charge anybody under 16 or 17 to go to the games, and I believe it's $5 for adults. Great, great baseball. I think they had 73 of the kids that are involved in these teams drafted by the major leagues. These are the best collegiate ball players in the United States. I believe with this team coming, I think they have kids from California, a lot of them from New England. I met some of the kids when we coaching Legion up in Montpelier. I mean, they're put up in host families, take them on. They get directly involved with the community and our kids. So I think and hope everybody will support this team, and it'll be a win-win for us. I hope.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Linda Carbonneau, and I live in Hartford, Vermont. And I like what you've done with the budget here and what's going on. I mean, it definitely seems like you've listened to all of us that have concerns about this. I think my concern's a little bit different. I love the fact that we are working with the police department, the fire department, and other community organizations such as HERS and the Haven and whatever, but we do have a homeless problem here in White River Junction, and we have a mental health problem. And I think that needs to be something that needs to be focused on. And I would also like to see more involvement of the community members with the Hartford Select Board as just talking. You know, I mean, it doesn't mean you have to make a decision about what you're going to do about it, but if we're advocating for it and we're educating people, I think that's important. And I just, again, want to say thank you to all of you for working so hard for this year's budget.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I appreciate your comment very much, and I agree with you. It's all crystal clear. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The screen up. We've got tables with chairs behind the curtain, so we're going to be pulling the screen up now. And each candidate will come up and give a 3-minute talk, and then take a seat at the table. When they're all done, if we could have Lori and Tom and Simon and Becca come up also on the stage so that everybody who's going to be involved answering questions will be up here. That'd be great. So we pulled names out of the hat. There's no rhyme or reason to the sequence in which you will now hear the candidates. So candidates, when you come up, please tell us what seat you are running for. Names and everything. All right. Oh, and also Kevin. Yeah, there are two people who asked just to speak briefly for people who want to hear. I said I recognize them briefly. Why don't we hear them first? You want to do that? Okay.
All right, so I'm going to ask to go slightly out of order. There are two people who are candidates who couldn't be here for medical reasons, Nancy Russell and Kevin Christie. And so I'm not going to recognize people to sort of be there in their stead and be proxies, but if Linda Trombley and then Lori Dickerson can come up and just briefly give your, this is why my candidate couldn't be here. Ms. Trombley?
Good evening. Thank you for recognizing me. I've been authorized on behalf of Nancy Russell to just make a very quick statement that she is on the ballot for the 2-year term for school board. There was a misunderstanding when she filed out her paperwork, and she would like to be the write-in candidate for the 3-year term. She would rather serve with Russell North on the school board than run against him. Thank you.
And she's ill, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. And then Lori Dickerson was going to speak for Kevin Christie.
Well, I'm not going to speak for him, but I just wanted to tell you that on one of the ice storms at the end of January, Kevin slipped and fell and had a knee injury, and he had surgery on his knee, not this past Friday, but the Friday before, and so he is out of commission, and I spoke to him last night, and he just wanted me to let you know that, he has been a school board member since 2007, and he wants to continue in that capacity. He is also serving, in the legislature on the Education Committee, so he would gladly accept any of your support. Thank you.
All right, so the first candidate, we drew the names by lot. First candidate is Alan Johnson. Mr. Johnson, if you join us and then take a seat. There you go.
Well, I'm going to not bore any of you by talking about energy. Most of you have heard my rants already, so instead I'll attempt to bore you by talking about resilience. Because resilience is what I'm really all about. Resilience is why I've served on the Energy Commission for 8 years. And while there's still plenty of room for opportunity, plenty of room for improvement in the area of energy, there are many other areas we need to worry about as well in the concept of resilience. Over the 8 years I've served, I've developed a huge amount of respect for our staff, our volunteers, our select board. They've really done, regardless of your personal opinion, they've done more than a fair job, given the circumstances they've had to deal with and what they have to work with. It's really quite impressive, the dedication that comes from all of these people. That said, of course, there's always room for improvement. I think of that of myself as much as anything else in the world. When it comes to the town, I believe we can improve the overall quality of the town while still reducing the tax rate, or at the very least, reducing the rate of increase of the tax rate in the long run. And it's really the long run that's important here. The best way, I think, to improve resilience is to make sure that we're focusing on sustainable practices. We can reduce operating expenses through smarter investment in infrastructure and technology. We can improve revenue through projects, policies, and development that make Hartford a more accessible and attractive place for visitors and residents of all income levels. And we can improve coordination with the schools on all of these points. And kind of personally, to me, I feel like we can do a better job of prioritizing select board time. I think that there's been great strides made in the last few years, a big push to make sure that our town government is more open and more transparent and more receptive to public feedback. And we don't want to undermine that effort by any means. But at the same time, we also have to recognize that sometimes there's a lot of noise made about some things that aren't as important as other things. We need to make sure that we are focusing select board time as well as town resources on what has the biggest impact to the town, regardless of how much noise is being made about it. I'm Alan Johnson. I'm running for a 3-year seat on the select board, and I thank you for your consideration.
Next person we have is Hava Walther.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. It's a big deal to me to be part of our town's process, to be part of town management and decision-making. So thank you to everybody who decided to come out and be a part of that tonight. My name's Hava Armstrong Walther, and I'm running for Select Board, 3-year term. I see so many of you here tonight that know me already through the community. Some of you I know as colleagues from school, and some of you I know as neighbors, and some of you I know from a million years ago from Girl Scouts. And so I'm happy to see everybody here. But for those who don't know me, I just want to let you know a little bit about me. My husband and I moved here right out of college, and we got our first jobs here. We bought our first home in Hartford. We opened a small business, a property maintenance business here in Hartford. We have children in Hartford. I work here in the Hartford School District. So I'm not I don't bleed red and blue, as red and blue as everybody else in Hartford, but I gotta say I have a lot of skin in this game. So I'm happy to be here and be a part, hopefully be a part of the select board and be a part of the decision-making process to be able to reach out to everybody else and help bring others into the fold to say what we think and how we feel and what we want for our town really matters. Aside from my experience here in the town, I have a lot of, I think, important skills to bring to the select board. I have a background in management, communications, and outreach, and a lot of my professional time has been spent in the nonprofit sector and volunteerism because, again, I feel that reaching out to everybody and making sure everybody has agency in the process is a big part of what makes a foundation for any good town, any good organization, a strong organization. Our town is getting ready to experience a lot of new and exciting growth. We have a new town manager that will hopefully be coming soon. We have a lot of other projects, though. On one hand, we have a lot of growth, and on the other hand, we have a lot of projects that we sort of have to figure out. We have some deferred maintenance. We have some growth issues. We have some school board negotiation issues. We have some disharmony in our town. And we have increasingly high housing costs. And many of us are worried about how residents are going to continue to stay in our town. Although I don't come with an agenda or an axe to grind, part of my focus, should I be elected to the select board, would be to help increase revenues through supporting businesses and programs in our town rather than higher property taxes. We have an amazing pool of talent here in our town and business acumen, and I believe that by reaching out to residents and through continued citizen engagement, through ad hoc committees, and through venues like this where the select board is continuing to reach out and get feedback from us in the town, that we will be able to help shepherd responsible growth and development in our town. Thank you.
Next is Paul Keene. Mr. Keene?
So I just got told there's a timer here is going to shut me up after 3 minutes. So I'm Paul Keene. I'm running for the same seat these fine people are running for, and I don't really have any qualifications. I was thinking about that. I mean, I've paid $100,000 in taxes for the last 24 years. I suppose that means I'm invested financially in the town, and I taught in this school for 24 and a half years. 3,000 parents saw my signature on their kids' report cards. Those kids spent 200 to 250 hours in my classroom, each one of those 3,000 students. And so I have a real emotional investment in the town and its future. But I couldn't figure out that presentation that I heard somebody say was crystal clear. I mean, all I want to know is how much are my taxes going to go up? That's all I want to know. I don't want to know all this other stuff. And I think most people want to know, how much is it going to cost me? I'm on a fixed income. I'm a retired person. And that's the perspective I'm going to bring if I'm elected to this term. How much is it going to cost you? How much are you going to have to take out of your wallet? And how are we going to keep the small town values? Wasn't it great to see Ralph Lehman's picture on the back of the handout tonight? How are we going to keep the small town values we've had in this town for all the kids that I taught who are now young adults? I mean, it used to be a town where you'd walk into the town hall and you'd know everybody by name, they'd know you by name. That's important. Statistics are not important. Small town values are important. Thanks. Hope you vote for me. I'd like to be on the board. I am getting kind of old, so this may be my last time to run for anything. Thanks.
All right, Sandy Mariotti?
Oh, great, I know when I have a minute left. Excellent. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sandy Mariotti. I've lived here in Hartford for about 30 years. I'm married to a local firefighter, and we raised 2 kids in this fine town. I have served on the select board for 2 years. The first year, I was just getting my feet wet. It took a while, so anybody getting on the board understand that. The second year, I served as clerk. I've enjoyed it a lot. Learned a lot. I thought I'd just mention a few things that we've seen that have happened here that have been positive, and you've heard them already. The Maxfield property, WABA, the town office, our beautiful town offices. So I've seen a lot happening over the last couple of years. What I'd like to see in certain issues in the town that are coming up, we're looking for revenue for the town. That's been a huge issue. And you're going to get an opportunity to vote on the local option tax here coming up on the ballot. And that's something that I helped to bring forth with the select board. So looking for more options for revenue, also looking to encourage reasonable economic development in the town. And I do support the Australian ballot. I'm saddened by the shortcoming of attendance that we've seen over the last few years.
with attendance there, and so I do support that. So I wanted to let you know where I stand on a few of the issues. If you have any questions, please feel free to approach me. My philosophies don't end there. I look forward and hope to serve you for another couple of years as I am running for the 2-year seat for Select Board. Thank you very much for coming. Have a nice evening and see you at the polls.
Next, we have Denise Johnson. Mrs. Johnson.
Hi, I'm Denise Johnson. Some of you know me from the fact that my husband Harry and I have raised 9 kids in this town. So you may not know my name. You know me as Obadiah's mom, H's mom, Sarah's, somebody's mom. I recently retired from the Norwich Inn where I was on the wait staff for 26 years. Now that the baby is 20, and I'm not working full-time. I've always been active in town doing this, that, and the other thing. In fact, Mr. Brown and I were talking about some of the fun times that we had when the kids were younger. It's time to get a little more active and a little more consistent in what I can do to help my community. I'm really excited about some of the stuff that's happening in Hartford over the last few years. We are just so on the brink of just so many amazing changes. If you look at the new Northern Stage and you look at the new municipal building and some of the new construction that's gone up and the wonderful job that Matt did with the old Legion building, there's just so many fun things happening. And it's really sitting in Norwich as a wait staff. I heard a lot of people muttering because 5 years ago, no one wanted to come down to Hartford. And now all of a sudden, people were coming in for breakfast and going, I wandered downtown yesterday because somebody told, I had so much fun. Or I went out to Queechee and I went to Vin's and it was amazing. And, we have such a gem here of a town. And it's so exciting that we have an opportunity to show other communities what can happen when an old rundown railroad town decides to pick itself up by its bootstraps and reinvent itself. So I'd love to help that. And it's just so much fun. There's a lot of fun things to do.
Next is Mike Morris. There he is.
Be that long. Good evening. I'm Mike Morris. I'm running for a 2-year seat on the Select Board. I've lived in the town of Hartford for well over 50 years. Wife Cindy was a high school sweetheart. We've been married over 36 years, raised 2 children, Mike Jr. and Jenny, right here in town, and we all graduated from the Hartford High School system. I've been involved in the meetings of the Select Board a lot in the last several years, but this last year particularly, I think I've only missed a few meetings, and I think I'm pretty up to par on what's going on and how the Select Board is working, and the task that they have at hand is not an easy one. This last year, we've lost the town manager, the fire chief, and the finance director, and this Select Board and these town employees have kept everything running smoothly. It goes to show what we can do as a team here. That's what I want to do when I join the select board, if you'd like the select board, is to be a part of the team, working towards everything running smoothly. I don't have a lot to say about any agendas or what I will do or won't do, other than I will be an ear and a voice for the people in this town and work towards spending the money wisely. I've served in the U.S. Army for over 5 years, and I was very proud of doing that. And if I'm elected on this select board, that'll make me proud, and it'd be an honor to serve you for the next 2 years. Thank you.
Dennis Brown?
First thing I'd like to do is to thank everyone for having us here and to the committee that puts this all on. I'd also like to say a special thanks to the 3 select board members that are stepping down for their service. Thanks to all the citizens that voted for me last year. I'd also like to say a big thank you to the folks that helped me and encouraged me to run again, and to my biggest supporter, my wife. For those that don't know me, I'm Dennis Brown. I grew up here in White River Junction, and I graduated from this school in '79. I've worked at Dartmouth College for over 13 years, currently as an information access assistant at their Baker Library. I also do some part-time work for their safety and security department. I'm a former Army Reservist, National Guard member, and Desert Storm veteran. I have a liberal studies degree from CCV. My family and I were steady volunteers when our town was underwater from Tropical Storm Irene. Our son, our one and only, graduated here in 2014. I would like to be part of an effort that makes this community an attractive place for businesses to locate, for families to raise their children, and to be a leader in Vermont for smart town government. My nearly 20 years on the zoning or planning commissions have given me deep insight on how large parts of this community work. I've also served on the 2nd and 3rd round of the charter commissions. As you've heard, we're also hiring a new town manager, and I'd like the chance to work with this person to make sure our town is on a course of fiscal responsibility. I am troubled knowing that our town is having trouble taking care of the facilities that we currently have. Recently, all 3 of our reservoirs had to be either breached or drained because they weren't maintained, and now we don't have the money to fix them. The ducks and the fish that were in or on Wright Reservoir are either gone or dead. It's going to be a tough sell to take on any new projects until I'm convinced that we can comfortably take care of what we currently have. I would do my best to balance our wants versus our needs. I work well with others and look forward to working with board members, town employees, and citizens to solve problems and move this town in a positive direction. I love our country, the state of Vermont, our community, and the town of Hartford. I'd like to ask for your support. Please vote Brown for our town. I won't let you down. Thank you.
All right, and then we have Russell North.
Good evening. My name is Russell North. I am indeed running for the 2-year seat for school board. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, as I talk well. excuse me. I realized in getting ready for this that many of you may not know me, which is not an ideal circumstance for someone running for public office. I've lived here in Hartford for 4 years. I've owned a business in Wilder for 8 years. I have 4 children, 3 of whom are attending the Hartford school system currently. 2 of my youngest 2 will be in the school system for another 6 years. So I have a very vested interest in ensuring a quality education for our students. I also recognize, because I am an accountant, the need for fiscal responsibility. We have to weigh the needs of the school with the amount we can all afford in taxes. In my accounting practice, I meet with a great number of Hartford residents throughout the year. So I think this is a great opportunity to solicit feedback, understand what concerns people may have about the school system, what improvements there could be, and I feel the burden of taxes, because of course, as a tax accountant, I realize no one likes to pay taxes. I've also served on school boards in other parts of the state. I was on the school board for 5 years in the Ira School District. I was the chair of that board, and during my tenure there, I helped discover a fraud that had been going on for 20 years. And the other part of it that I'm very proud that I did is help implement a budget process where we got to a point where we could establish a rainy day fund in anticipation of future tax increases. And that's one thing as a board member I would like to work on, is looking at a little long-range projections. Yes, it's a certain degree of guesstimate involved, but still to get an understanding of where the stresses may be and anticipate them and then think of ways to deal with them. One of the things I think is very important as a school board member is to be an advocate for the school. The district I was previously in was a tuition community. So I understand what parents who are sending their children to a school under a tuition program are looking for. And I think I can bring that perspective to the school board in helping bring new sources of revenue to the schools. And I'll wrap up by saying, I think being a school board member is critically important, especially as we go forth, because Vermont itself is getting older, and we're having fewer and fewer students. And as this happens, there's going to be a competition among towns for when new people move in. There's going to be many choices, and one of the things that as a parent, I know when I made my relocation decision I looked at was the perception of the school system and the quality. So I think it is very important going forth that we balance the needs of education with the ability to pay, and we continue to strive to have the best school we can for our students here in Hartford. Thank you very much.
All right, so now we'll begin the question and answer. Ask that people come to the microphones, identify yourselves, and try and keep it to 1 minute. If we can make it a question rather than a long wind-up, that's better. Please direct it to either school board about a question or a specific candidate. If it's a specific candidate you're directing it toward, we'll allow that person 2 minutes to answer the question. If there's someone else on that board or running for a seat on that board that wants to chime in, we'll give that each person 30 seconds if somebody wants to chime in following that answer. All right, so it's open, school budget, town budget, questions for candidates. Somebody better get up before Mr. Flynn. It's Mr. Arnold. Oh, Peter Merrill, all right, we have a switch in the lineup.
Peter Merrill, town of Quechee, the village of Quechee, I should say. So this is directed to the candidates for the select board, all of which I was very interested in hearing. As was just discussed by Mr. North, we have a real demographic issue facing us, which is that the entire state is getting older, and the Windsor County is in fact getting older than the state is at a faster rate. And this has huge consequences in terms of the need for schools, the needs for new houses, the need for new furniture, all the things that drive the economy, and the need for people wanting to come here and have jobs and all the rest of that. So what are you proposing to do about the demographic issue facing us? Thank you.
And are you directing that to anybody, everybody?
Anybody who wishes to answer.
How
on
you're
the
going to
select
make us younger?
board. Well, not how are they going to?
I'm looking.
How are they going to attract younger people to this town so the town has a future?
Okay. All right. Anybody want to? All right. I'm sorry. I don't know all your names yet. I should know them. Sorry about that. I know Alan. Is there one under here? I don't know where the one. Okay. Thank you, Dennis.
Testing,
Mr. Johnson.
testing. So I spent this morning at Vermont Technical College at the Climate Economy Summit, and that was one of the key points that was made by a couple of presenters. And one of the challenges that we have is our youth are leaving to go find high-tech, sustainable jobs outside the state. They also are looking for more sustainable lifestyles. Generally heading to more urban areas. I think that Hartford can attract this youth by continuing to develop the sustainable businesses that we have already attracted, more of them. We've got Norwich Technologies here. It's a solar power company. We've got Vermont Mobile Homes. There's any number of wonderful technical jobs that we have in this town, and we can expand that. And we can continue to make our town more attractive for those kinds of things. The other side of the equation is the more sustainable lifestyle. We can provide lower energy footprint, more sustainable, lower environmental footprint housing that is also less expensive, not just in its total energy costs, but the construction itself is less expensive. The technology is there, and we just have to adopt it, bring it in, embrace it, and we can make Hartford an area that is a gem for attracting youth back into our state.
Thank you. Ms. Walther and Ms. Mariotti, you both had your hands up.
I'd like you to turn eventually too.
Yes, Mr. Brown, noted.
This is a great question, and I think the first thing that comes to mind is affordable housing. It's something that we hear about again and again and again. As somebody who has a business in real estate, I can tell you it's very hard for young families, for working families, for people who are just starting out. It's very hard for our town to welcome them. And I think affordable housing and working towards creative solutions to that problem is one of the best, fastest, surest ways to be able to help that. The other thing that comes to mind is school choice, actually, something that Russ North talked about. And part of what I do for my day job is I am talking to families in the Upper Valley, mostly students, parents, and teachers, who are in school choice areas. And people can choose to come to Hartford for school choice, but there's also cultivating and capitalizing on all of the benefits that we have in Hartford, and our school district is one of them. When people are out in outlying areas looking at where to send their kids to school, a lot of times they're choosing Hartford over many other places because of our strong school district, and that is a key to actually bring more people into the school district, eventually through moving, right, through a population shift. As more and more people, as we have something that more people want, we're going to be able to bring younger families in.
Thank you. We'll go to Ms. Mariotti, and then we'll get to you, Mr. Brown.
That's a great question. I have two thoughts on that. First of all, I noticed that my young adult children use a lot of technology. And I think we could, as a town, utilize that to reach out to the younger generation, expressly really making a strong voice for the town of Hartford and why the younger generation should move here. We have a great aquatic center, lots of whimsical culture here, and I think that will draw people. The other thing I'd like to see is, and I wouldn't even know where to start with this, but tax incentives to bring the younger people here.
Thank you. Mr. Brown.
Thank you for that question. I'm going to jokingly say, what's the problem? Meaning, I decided to stay here. I'm a lifelong resident of this town, so it can work for people. On the more serious side, I would pick local control. I would fight for local control. I've seen some instances where the state or regional commissions have gotten involved in our business and changed what the locals wanted, the town, and so I would do my best to fight against that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to get in? Mr. Keene?
Is this on? Can you hear me? So this is going to sound odd from somebody who spent 25 years teaching, but we spend an awful lot of time praising the classroom kind of kid. And I'm concerned about the kid who feels there's no highway for them to the future. We need an apprenticeship program, not just in this town, but in America, period, so that kids who aren't classroom kind of kids can feel there's a future for them. And if I was in any position to facilitate that, I would like to talk to some people about it. Something I'd like to do before I die. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? We have other questions coming. All right, we'll go to the next question. Ma'am.
Mary Hanson, White River Junction. For the select board candidates, local option tax, yes or no? Why?
It's like Mr. Keene's on his feet.
Yeah, so I read Mr. Hungel's two-page article Sunday on it, and I didn't understand the situation any better after reading it than I did before, and I've spent 17 years in college, so I have the ability to understand it. I simply don't understand it. But as somebody who's on a fixed income, I would like the freedom to make the decision myself. I don't want to go buy this item or be at this program or restaurant or theater because the tax is too much. I can make that decision. I can't make it when there's an across-the-board tax. So for fixed income people, I think you give us more freedom if we can choose what we're going to purchase and not purchase than get an across-the-board tax and we have no freedom whatsoever. We're just in a straitjacket of increasing taxes.
Mr. Johnson, local option tax.
Just to be clear, we're talking about the 1% meals and rooms? Okay. I support it. It's not perfect, but neither is a pure property tax. Bottom line is, it comes back to me, it's all about resilience. What's the more resilient option? It's broadening your tax base. Having only property taxes to depend on is not good. This doesn't come close to solving the problem, but it's a step in the right direction. I understand that there, is potential for some real impact on some of the businesses that have to take on the burden of this tax and pass it along to their patrons. But for my part, I think that this puts a direct incentive to the town to increase those revenues. It's there, as Mr. Briggs points out, that the town is already incented to improve, to bring people into our businesses in general. But that's indirect. This is a direct revenue stream that the town is now incented to improve. And should I be on the select board, that's definitely an area I would look at is how do we improve our revenue sources? And that's one way is to attract more people to our meals and rooms tax.
Anyone else on local option tax? Ms. Mariotti.
Because I spoke to it earlier. I support the local option tax. In working with the select board, we have figured out that the revenue would be over $200,000 a year, and that is a huge benefit to this town. And I don't know if it's appropriate for me to explain it. If anyone has any questions, certainly feel free to approach me after.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Brown.
Thank you for this question as well. I have very mixed feelings about this. In the end, I guess I'm for it. I'm cautious about turning our merchants into tax collectors. I think that's a tough one. But in the end, I think we will benefit by it. I'm pleased to know that they've decided on what revenues where they would be put. And after, like Mr. Keene said, reading the Valley News and some of the things that, some of the hurdles that Woodstock has recently gone through, I'm hopefully confident that we wouldn't make the same mistake and burden those merchants with some of the problems they've experienced. I think if implemented properly, it could be a good thing. Thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. Johnson?
As someone who's been in the service industry for the better part of 30 years, I'm definitely opposed to it. I think it puts an unfair burden on certain segments of our local businesses, for one, and for two, we're in a place in Hartford where a lot of the excitement that's being generated right now is service industry related excitement. And a lot of those people have a choice where to spend their money. And if they feel like we're trying to suck that little extra out of them, they're more likely to go to Hanover, go to Lebanon. We're already arguing with, well, gee, we don't have sales tax in Lebanon. And I think it's just one more place that it would make it hard for the folks on this side of the river in our downtowns and the businesses in Quechee to have to, just compete with.
Ms. Walther? I think I thought you had some interest.
Just quickly, I have to say yes is a short answer. It's a difficult decision. It, on one hand, is only 50 cents on a bill, a $50 bill. So do I think 50 cents is going to make somebody necessarily drive across the river? I don't. But when it's added on to the 9% that's already there, that's tough, and I understand that. But on the other hand, our town needs revenue. And do I think it is a tipping point to lose business in our town? I think our town has a lot that competes on the open market in a way that Hartford eateries might not necessarily be competing with chain restaurants in West Lebanon. And I think that's our strength. And I like that it's going to bring in revenue, I have to say. And I like that it goes to capital improvement. And I like that the voters get a say in how this is being spent. I think a lot of time has been put in on this, and I think we should support it. Thank you.
All right. Other questions? Oh, I'm sorry, did somebody else have a question? Mike, did you want to get in on this? He's all set. Okay. Follow up, ma'am.
That's not a follow-up.
I'm sorry.
It's a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My name is Robin Adair Logan, and my address is to a single select board member.
Well, let's see. Now that you've said that, I think she can probably get into the microphone.
How's it now?
There you go.
Right. My question is to a specific select board member. However, all the people on the select board commission should actually listen to this. This is for Alan. I would like you to address whether you have modified your behavior toward other task force members since your time serving on the Municipal Building Advisory Commission. At that time, you consistently bullied a fellow commissioner, a professional architect who was also a professor of architecture and environmental building at Dartmouth. By refusing to let her speak, to give her opinions, by talking over her when she finally had an opportunity to speak, and by consistently disagreeing with her until twice you drove her to leave the meeting. My question, Is this what we may expect from you and other select board members, by the way? Should you be elected to the select board? If not, how do you plan to conduct yourself when presented with opposition from either the public and/or other select board members?
Mr. Johnson.
First, I'm terribly sorry to understand you feel that way about our interactions on the Municipal Building Advisory Committee. I don't think that's not quite how I remember things going down. I know the person you're speaking of, and I think very highly of her and of yourself and your contributions to that group. As far as my part, all I can say is, I reflect on these things a lot, and I try my best to try and figure out ways that I can be more cooperative. But ultimately, we need to ask questions, and we need to understand what each other is saying. The person you're speaking of certainly had plenty of opportunity to speak. I'm sure there are other Municipal Building Advisory Committee members that would confirm that she probably spoke more than anyone else. And I don't think that was a problem. I think she had a lot of good things to say. I'm not aware of a time when I caused her to leave in an upset fashion of any way. I'm kind of surprised of that comment. I certainly would look to temper anything I might have done, be very aware of my tone and attitudes toward others. I try to be in general. That said, I will continue to seek understanding, ask clarifying questions, and when the information isn't clear, I'll persist until I understand what's trying to be said. I'll also push for making sure that the interest of the group is being upheld, as opposed to letting any individual or significant minority within a group dominate the proceedings. There's one incident that I can definitely recall where I attempted to call the question. I tried to bring some order to a fairly lengthy meeting that we had a lot to get through. And that was that request for the group to vote on whether or not we should end discussion, which is all a call a question is. I was seeking for the group to speak on their desire to continue discussion or not. And you had a reaction that surprised me greatly to that request. I don't think the individual you're speaking of, I didn't perceive her to be that concerned about it. But I'll do my best to keep things moving smoothly.
Others on the select board or candidates for select board, I think the questioner was asking about how you would see your role in being congenial or cordial to others on the board. I don't know if you want to go, Mr. Dennis, if you wanted to speak to it. Mr. Keene.
Yeah, let me just back up a little bit and say in 1992 I took a course at Breadloaf School of English called Gender Reading and Writing, and I was one of 3 men in the course. The rest were all women. And some days the women would weep after I spoke. And one woman came up to me afterward and told me, it's not you, you just remind me of someone who bullied me when I was a child. I swear to God, this is true. And I had no idea. I thought I was being spontaneous. I was perceived as an interrupter, as a dominator. I thought I was just give and take. It wasn't give and take. I was representing every loudmouth male who had shut her down for 50 years. And I had to learn that. That I live in a world where men have shut women down for years. And I'm doing it now. I'm being loud and spontaneous. I'm not being a bully, but some people are going to say, what a loudmouth bully. I wouldn't vote for that guy. That's the way I am. And I got to tell you, I got another problem too. I'm 6 feet 2 inches tall. I'm already a dominator. I'm already the guy in the room who thinks he's hot, I can't say that word, baloney. So it's a two-way street. Yes, men have had to learn in the last 20 years that they have been unfair to women, and that what they think is leadership is borderline bullying. But at the same time, I'm not entirely responsible for being loud and theatrical and 6 feet 2 inches tall. Thank you.
I wanted to jump in on this subject too, and just because I think it's such an important issue, Robin Adair, that you bring up around how it is that we treat one another in the political sphere. And the thing that I have learned over the last 4 years is that actually the business of being on the select board, the business of being on the school board, or being on the commissions is emotionally a very challenging situation. And amazingly, it seems to become more so as time goes on. So for instance, when I came onto the select board in the first couple of years, it was a process that was pretty smooth. You know, I could kind of get along with I would sort of look over and say, why are they getting so upset? And then as time went on, I realized, wow, hey, I'm getting upset too. And not only that, but I am behaving in a way which I might have been critical when I saw other people doing it in previous years. And I think the thing that I've learned about it, and that it just is interesting to bring forward, is that it is emotionally challenging to be engaged in a situation where you're making decisions about things that you really care about, that you recognize are important, within the lights are on, and very often there's a critical eye pointed in your direction, and it's not so easy to open your mouth and actually say something that isn't the wrong thing to say. So it's part of what these people are signing up for, actually, is an emotional roller coaster. And it ain't easy. There is no select board member that I have seen that hasn't had that meeting after which they can't get to sleep because they're so upset because of something that happened or something that was said, or you get to this point where you're like so mad you can't, whatever it is. It's just interesting to recognize that aspect of the political process in probably in any town or whatever. But I think it's important to bring a sense of sympathy, I think, to people who are in this environment and doing the best they can to get along with one another, doing the best they can to figure out what the right thing is to do, to have the courage to kind of step up when they think that that they can make a difference, or step back when they realize they can't, or whatever it is, and in general for us all to kind of appreciate the extent to which efforts are being made.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Others on the select board.
Could I just add a quick comment, follow up to that, since it was directed to me, or is there others?
Why don't we have everybody else, and then if you want to follow up.
Are there
again.
others? Oh, I'm sorry.
Because I think she did want to hear from everyone else.
Well said, Simon, very well said. I said earlier that I've attended a lot of these meetings over the last several years, and I had a few of those sleepless nights, and I wasn't on the board. It's easy to get emotionally involved in some of this, and you got to learn to not take a lot of this personally, that you're there to do a job, best your ability, representing you, the voters. I've always, no, you don't know me, I've never been a calm, cool, collected person. I was kind of a hothead early years, and my wife will tell you I still am, but there's a time and a place. The boards have challenges, and I've seen a lot of the problems, I want to say personnel conflicts over the years, watch the boards, that they've resolved without bringing it out into a big public debate, which I found very, it complements the board to deal with these things when they have these different opinions. But we need to not take it personal, is what I've learned over the years of attending these meetings, on all the different discussions I've had with the boards and different feelings about what they're doing and not doing, and try to work with them, not at them.
Thank you. Ms. Mariotti?
Sure. Yeah, definitely had some nights when I've gone home and chewed on a few issues. I think the things that I try to remember when I'm addressing personal conflicts is that, A, it's not personal. It's about what's the best for the town. So when I go home at night and I'm having a particularly challenging evening with something that's been discussed, I say to myself, do you think you did what's best for the town? If the answer is yes, then okay, I did all right. If the answer is no, then I need to give somebody a call. And that's happened a couple of times. So there you have it. That's my solution for dealing with issues that happen.
Okay, let's come back this way, Ms. Walter.
I actually don't have much, I think, that I can even add to that. I think this has been covered. You guys have done a great job. Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Yes, and thank you for this, Robin Adair. The one thing I'd say, I'd like to echo what Sandra just said, but one thing I appreciate in all the boards and commissions I've belonged to is these different views and the diversity of, we've had women and guys and all kinds of different views. I've learned a lot from this, and I've really appreciated the diversity of those. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson, I don't know if you've had a chance.
I haven't. As the mom of 9 kids, I think I've spent a considerable amount of time honing some skills in terms of negotiation and mediation. It might help, just saying.
Truth there. Truth there.
We'll give you a final point, Mr. Johnson.
I've only got 2, and I can't imagine 9. I just wanted to say that, all of what's been said about making sure we listen to each other with compassion and understanding is absolutely critical. And the flip side of that is we also need to recognize that we need to challenge each other, right? We need to challenge each other's understanding of an issue, ask the questions, challenge ourselves to understand an issue. And that's all I ever tried to do on the Municipal Building Advisory Committee. Anytime there was heat, I tried just to ask the questions. And I'll keep doing that. And I will expect very highly of my fellow select board members, should I be elected, to do the same of me. And I'll do my best to respond and question my own understanding and accept my own ignorance of issues when it's there. I think that's as important as being compassionate with each other.
Thank you. Was there a question back here? Somebody? Different question. I'm sorry, Rebecca, did you want to, Ms. White? She has one, okay. All right, so we're ready for that different question now, ma'am.
Judith Bettis. And every year, the first thing I do when I get this printed town report is to read the audit report. It's not here that I can find. If it's not available in this town report, I'd like to know why.
Mr. Wooster, I believe, can shed some light on this.
Thanks, Judy. It's a great question and something that we are embarrassed about not to have it in there because it is always in there. And due to a combination of not having a finance director and an interim town manager, we weren't able to get that in time to have it go to the printer. And so I will follow up with our interim town manager tomorrow to see where it is. Mr. Grassi and I have met with the auditor once. We are convinced that things are on a good course, and we should have the document soon. But we do apologize for not having it in the town report because that was our goal and we didn't make it. So we'll have that available, and we'll bring copies if we can on Saturday or as soon as we have it available, and we'll put it on the town website.
So if I had gone down to municipal building, this week. I could not have gotten a copy of it. It's not completed, is that what I'm hearing?
I don't believe we have copies of it yet, that's correct. So I don't believe it's completed, but I haven't spoken with the manager about it in a week.
Didn't that complicate your making this year's budget proposal by not knowing the numbers that you
Generally,
needed to start with?
Sure, yeah. Generally speaking, the audit comes in at the very end or just after the select board has done its work on the budget. So we usually, by about the second week of January, have adopted a budget. Usually the audit comes screaming in at the printing deadline and goes right into the report. And often the first time we see it is the first time you've seen it. So it's not an ideal state of affairs. It's something we've talked about. Is there a way that we could have our fiscal year and the town meeting and the audit and some of these things move around a bit? And we haven't come up with a good solution for that. I will say that at no time in the 6 years that I've been on the board have we used the audit in making our budget presentation for the coming year.
I don't accept that, because someone somewhere had to have some advance discussion with the auditors or the audit company so that you could predict how much you had to carry over and that kind of stuff. How much money is available to carry over in the undesignated fund and that kind of information. Are you telling me that you didn't even get that information this year from the audit company?
No, as I said, Mr. Grassi and I met with the auditor and talked about some of these issues, including the unassigned fund balance. And so, without having the printed documents to show you, we talked to the auditor, we asked those types of questions, we had the information we needed to go forward. And there's nothing coming in the audit that we know of that has will make any impact on the budget presentation we've made for you. Thanks.
Other questions? Back here, ma'am. Hopefully we can get you a microphone or you can come down. Okay.
Hi, my name is Abigail Robbins, and I'm a junior at Hartford High School, as well as Becca White's intern. So I was just wondering what you guys would like to accomplish in your next term if you're elected, and this is for both the school board and select board.
Well, you know, the school board has been neglected. You're the first one to give them a question. So why don't we start with the school board? So Mr. North, why don't you start off?
Thank you. I guess one of the things that I'd like to accomplish is going forth and expanding some of our efforts on outreach and advocacy on the wonderful programs we have at Hartford High School and outreach in terms of the consolidation procedures. The other thing I would like to go forward with is, as I alluded to it in my opening remarks, is looking and trying to project where the budgets might be going forward, so we could start to develop more of a long-range perspective to help identify problems and good things that are happening within the school system.
Thank you.
We'll just go down the line, Ms. Mariotti.
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, there's a couple of things I'd like to work on. Increasing youth awareness with IT and community awareness, reaching out to the community more. We're still striving to do that, I know, even while I've been on the select board for the last couple of years. I'd like to also look into some government incentives for repairing Wrights Reservoir and trying to find some more revenue for the town. So that's where I'm at.
Ms. Morris?
Well, I think most importantly is something that has been discussed is some of the projects in town that really need attention. Fairview Terrace has fallen in. I mean, it's going to cave in one of these days, and hopefully nobody gets hurt. We're working on the stormwater drainage with the bond issue that's up for vote. And these things are things that need to be taken care of. Sandy mentioned the reservoirs along with Dennis Brown. Someone else pointed out to me that those were basically, from what I understand, gifts to the town, and they were a water source, a reserve water source that we no longer have for backup. And those are important issues that I think we need to pay better attention, prioritize the projects that need to be done in town, and then work on the wants as we can.
Ms. Walther?
I think that going forward,
we all have so many wants when you talk about wants and needs. There are a lot of needs that are coming up on our budget, as I understand it, things that have been deferred for a while and that we're going to have to start addressing. The storm drains are a project that come to mind in particular. And I think one of the things we have to think about is when we're addressing our needs, let's just make sure they're hand in glove with the direction we want to go in. One of the things that's really important to me is looking at what our master plan is and our capital improvement plan, and making sure that all the decisions we make about wants and needs are hand in glove with that, so that all the money that we spend is going in the right direction. So no matter which projects we select, we want to make sure that we're headed in the direction that helps build this town and focus on growth and development, really.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you. If I was to hope for any accomplishment, I think I would hope that we would come up, I know the town's had a wish list of things that we need to have done, projects, but sometimes I see that we vote for one project, but no ramifications on that it killed another project. So I'd really like a wish list that we know the items to pick, and if there are consequences, I think they should be spelled out to the voters at that time. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson?
I think we're heading in some pretty amazing directions, and I think one of the things that happened was we went through a recession, and who knew there could be a hurricane in the state of, who knew? And that was kind of a really bad 1-2 punch, and it put us behind. At the same time, some of what's happened has left us with bond issues that are actually, there's new infrastructure, new buildings, new projects that are actually paying not only for themselves, but a little extra. We have some amazing people in the town of Hartford. Tad Nunes has gone out of his way to make sure that the gift that we got as far as the new fields, that there was a way to put in all kinds of cool things that are going to enhance those kids staying in town, that are going to enhance the kind of development we want in town, that are just plain, that we're not having to pay for. You know, the aquatic center is online to expand, and they have donors lined up to pay for it so that we don't have to. So some things had to be deferred so we could get some, a toe in the door so we could get some other things done. And I think, we're at a place where some of those other things are going to start getting done. And, we need a priority list, and we need to, start pecking away at it. But we need a bigger tax base. It's coming. It's happening. The first Prospect Street building is online. 2 more are on the way. There's finally going to be a building on the vacant lot downtown. Things are happening.
Mr. Johnson?
So the question was, what do we want to accomplish in our term? Is that right? Yeah,
I think so.
So I would look to continue some of the efforts of the Energy Commission and expand those beyond. The Energy Commission's been looking to has been pushing for smarter planning around energy for a number of years now. I can easily show financials that, in hindsight, which is no good to anyone, that if we'd hired an energy coordinator some 4 or more years ago, then we would have a lot more money for a lot more things right now. I would expand that concept to the good work that's being done by our community resilience organization team, because energy is a subset of that. It may be the largest component. It may not be. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to attend as many of their meetings as I'd like, just because of the timing. But getting resilience planning into this town's DNA is so important to me. And then, of course, there's any number of projects that we can identify that would have cash flow positive, would be cash flow positive from day one, or very short payback periods, not unlike the streetlights program, which had a 5-year payback period and reduced our largest line item on the budget by, tens of thousands of dollars, cut it well in half. So there's more to be done there. There's more to be done, again, outside of energy, and I'll be looking for all kinds of projects along those lines. Cash flow positive first.
Mr. Keene?
Does this work? Yeah. So I don't have a soundbite I can give you. I was going to say I want to make Hartford great again, but I'm not going to.
This is select board, not president.
This is really my hair. But the one thing I want to do, which will probably not get me any votes, is I want to make sure that the new town manager realizes we're a small town and we want to stay a small town and we like small town values. We like knowing each other's by first name. We don't like any phony baloney and pompous, one-upsmanship. I want the new town manager, whoever she is, to know that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Mr. Betty?
My name is George Betty. I'm a White River Junction resident. It's probably more of a comment, but if you would like to comment on my comment, that would be great. I think Hunter Riesberg was a very competent manager. I also think he had a leadership style that at times tended to dissuade very competent people from serving with him and serving the town. So in a way, this goes a little bit to Robin Adair's comment about this architect, and that could be anybody. The fact is, this township or this aggregate of towns has an enormous amount of competent people who love Hartford. We really do. I mean, it's remarkable when you look at this town. The businesses we have here, the amount of brains and wealth and passion and other things. I really think we have a lot going for us. And so there's always a risk that as you're running for candidates that we and you kind of look at, well, the people do the work. Yeah, you are, but I think it's probably even more important for you to find other good people to do the work, because there's a lot of people here who are far more competent than you are to do certain things. And that is not a negative statement. I mean, that's just reality. I run a successful company, and part of what I've had to learn in the last 5 years is that my company's going to die and won't be able, it'll suffocate from its current growth curve if I don't get better people than I to run certain parts of it. And that's not been easy because my company's my baby. So I guess I'm asking you to first consider what I've said, and I'm asking you to please recognize the incredible importance of utilizing the resources that we have in this town to be on ad hoc committees. I'm thinking about things like the town hall, the town charter, the way people jumped in to help the town from Irene. I mean, there were multimillionaires from Hanover in mud boots and flannel shirts that I know nobody in this town knew when we were doing cleanup of all these houses along, the White River. And I never forgot that day when Tad Nunez was out there, and there's just hundreds of people out there just can't wait to get to work. I mean, that was just, to me, one of the highlights in the life of our town. I mean, I remember just bawling so many times coming down there and seeing these people, hundreds of people wanting to work from all kinds of economic strata. So I think it's really incumbent for you that you have to do this if we're gonna get past your own limitations. And again, that's not a negative statement about you, but it is a plea that we not get into this top-down model that I think at times Hunter struggled with knowing how to get out of that because he's more old school. I think it's more of a mindset than necessarily a character flaw. But as we look for a town manager, I think it's really important you select someone who has those values and that you also replicate that as you move forward and find people to serve, because we do need people. Okay, thank you.
Yes, to the extent it was a question, if there are comments, you follow up, Mr.
Comment
Morris?
to his comment?
Sure.
I don't think it could have been said any better. There has been resilience in the past, and you're right on, George. You're right on.
Anyone else? Ms. Johnson?
I think that was very well said, and I think after Irene, I got together with a couple of friends, and we approached Tad, and we put together a little plant giveaway, which wasn't like a big deal. We had so much fun. It was out at Clifford Park. A bunch of us that were gardeners hauled out our, extra plants and gave them away to folks in West Hartford who didn't even have yards left. And I'm just saying it because it was a bunch of people just coming together and having a good time and helping the town. And I think one of the things that we've gotten ourselves stuck into more than once is that by the time you got through the red tape and talked to the right person, if there's just so much that can be done and so many talented people. And if we can start putting resources together and we can start communicating a little better, there's like no end to what we can do around here.
Others? Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Thank you. Just echoing what people are saying about Irene recovery, I'm glad you brought that up. I thought I was very moved in seeing that volunteer effort, and from people not even from our local Hartford community. There were people from all over that showed up for that. We brought our young son of 14 years, even though they advised against it, but we thought that's life. We've been dealt a blow, and he should see it too. So that was a great experience. I'm sad that it happened, and I'm glad that we're finally getting recovered from it.
Thank you.
I think you're singing my song. I love the direction that our town is now going in with a lot of input from citizens. And you're right, what's the saying? A good manager does a good job and a great manager finds great people. That's not quite right, but that's the idea. And that's exactly my feeling. We have tremendous talent and a huge pool of experience here. And if I had one overarching goal for my term, it would be to bring in more collaboration and citizen involvement, because what you're talking about is the backbone of our town. And that's really what's going to make us want to be a part of it, make us want to carry it through and see the new growth that's down the road.
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? Yeah, excuse me, but since you're doing a survey, that might be a good place to put is what talents and gifts and abilities do you, as a citizen, assuming you're sending us out to the vast majority of the citizenry here, you could say what talents and assets and gifts or abilities do you have, and where do you see the possibility of rendering those for service? And then, you develop this database of people who want to share their gifts. And, if you're doing the survey, it's not going to cost you any money to throw one more question on there. So,
Mr. Kane, you want to get in on this, and then Mr. Johnson?
I think that's a great idea.
I want to, just repeat what was said about the citizen committees. Having served on one myself with the Municipal Building Advisory Committee, I think that those are wonderful things we should continue to try and take advantage of. Obviously, with respect to the time of the people serving, I think that from my experience, I wouldn't have had, I wouldn't have had the committee disperse over such things, but there was certainly a lot of time spent in a bit of disorder when we got to be a larger committee and things really got going. I think there's a challenge to organizing and managing those to keep them more efficient and on point so that we can make them more attractive to others who might want to participate. It is certainly, a big challenge to get people to volunteer on commissions where the end point is, never. If you want to stay, you stay as long as you want to stay. But with these project-based committees, I think you can attract a lot more talent from the community. But going to the point of being respectful, I think that we've got a big challenge with the select board with Chuck Wooster stepping down. I mean, he's the shining example of a good chair of a meeting. I think that we're going to have a challenge in replacing him and bringing the kind of compassion to respond to the public that he has, but also being able to handle certain hot-headed individuals who might come in and try and run rampant over proper procedure with patience but persistence, and ultimately getting the meeting back on track and moving it forward. There's a balance to be had there, and it's very tricky. And I think that we might benefit from, I don't know, some kind of training for chairs of these ad hoc committees, or not ad hoc committees, but you know what I mean. Or maybe some particular staff that is more trained on Robert's rules when it's needed. Generally you try and keep these things informal, but you get a large enough group and you got to get formal. So,
Mr. Kane?
I had all of the Abeti children in class. Was it 7 or 5? 6. So you're rivaling Ms.
He wasn't a
Johnson
math
here.
teacher.
By the way, anybody who can raise 9 children deserves a PhD in motherhood. So in tandem with that survey idea, Mr. Abeti, is my comment about Ralph Lehman. We need somebody with an institutional memory here in town who knows everybody and can just call somebody up and say, hey, wouldn't this work with you? I think of somebody like Doug Heavisides, who knows everybody, somebody who's been here all their life. And so I'm very reluctant to put all my cards on a paper survey. I don't know. Maybe I'm showing my age, but I just remember Ralph, and I remember he ran things by not running things. He just was a guy, and everybody knew him, and if you needed some help, he used the resources of the town manager's office to help you. It was a small town then. It's still a small town, but we're getting a little pretentious. Thanks.
I'm not sure who was first. I think you probably were, Mr. Arnold. Go ahead. Well,
yeah, I
but
was
he hasn't
standing
done
here
it on
for a
this-
long time.
This section. So, well, go ahead, Mr. Arnold.
I'd first like to make a comment that I'm very glad that Russell North is running, and because right away he noticed long-range issues with enrollment and is bringing it up for discussion within the school board. And it's unfortunate that Nancy Russell is running against him. So I really urge you to try to put her in as a write-in candidate against Kevin Christie. He's already served 8 years. My question is, we have a code of conduct on the school board, which a couple of years ago created a lot of problems when I spoke out. And the code of conduct says that if there's a majority of school board members that vote one way, you're supposed to shut up and not take that issue or not take your issue to the public, like before a bond vote, such as the artificial turf. I would like to ask all of you, because it's really a townwide issue, whether you think that's a healthy way to manage things or not.
All right, quickly, I guess we'll go down the line, starting with you, Mr. Russell.
All right,
I'll take that first off. And I would disagree with the characterization. I mean, the debate is very healthy. Stating your opinion is very healthy. But it comes a point when a board has made a decision, you have to respect that decision. And one of the things in thinking about it is, if there's an action on the school board that I agree with, I would state it, we decided. If there's an action I voted against, which would be part of the public record, it was the board decided. I mean, you can never come up with an example where something may be so strong where you have to take a more of an advocacy role, but if asked directly if I wasn't in favor of something, I would say what my opinion was, but it's a fine line that you have to navigate in dealing with in a board situation, because sometimes you have to accept that your opinion is not going to carry the day, but you still can try subtly or continuously within the system to make a change.
Thank you. Ms. Mariotti.
Very well said, Russell. I've actually had a couple of times on the select board where I've come down on a different side than other board members. It is very challenging. I don't believe that there's ever a time that I was ever shushed. I don't believe anybody on this board would ever do anything like that. And I've always felt my point was heard. It may not come down on the same side, but then again, as Russell said, once we've made a decision and the discussion is completed, it's not keep it hush-hush or run to the corner and weep. It's, okay, this is the decision we made, this is what we think is best for the town, and move on from there.
Can I just, it's not being interpreted properly, because the issue is that the discussion is shut down before the vote comes to the public. So the public is not being able to hear, they may be able to watch CATV and watch the back and forth and the disagreement, but the decision is made maybe a month before the decision, for example, to support a bond is made a month before it has to go in front of the town for vote. So the townspeople don't get to hear the other side in a public forum. That's the issue. So when they go to vote for the bond, it's not, of course, you should have a lot of back and forth before, but the townspeople don't get to hear the other side after the way things are set up right now.
So in that instance, if you don't think that you hear what you need to hear, then you should be contacting a board member and asking us. Come right up. I encourage people to come up and speak with me all the time, and I would encourage everybody to continue to do that. I think you may not get the back and forth, but we can give you what can be said in public. We won't be able to give you anything that's an executive session, but we could give you information to help you make a more informed decision.
Ms. Walther?
I think that that's a very complicated question. I think the onus falls upon each board to be able to present all sides of a subject when the material is going up for a vote. That's actually sort of the job of a board, is to bring up all the sides, to make sure that there's an informed public. That being said, I know that there's a point in time where a board makes a recommendation, and at that point in time, I think you have to stay together as a board. The board makes a decision, and the majority of votes do count. But at the point in time where you're bringing materials before the public, asking them to vote on it, I think there's a duty on any board to make sure that the public understands what those sides are.
Mr. Brown?
No, thanks.
Ms. Johnson, any comment?
No.
Mr. Johnson?
No.
Mr. Keen?
Well, I have only spent 50 years on this issue, and it's why I resigned from the school board. I cannot afford to have my blood pressure raised for the next 6 months while they debate it. What I have heard tonight is that once the board makes a decision, individual members of the board who disagree with it can never voice their opinion in opposition again. That would erase Bernie Sanders' entire national campaign. It's un-American. It's Joseph McCarthy. And I don't want to play the age card, But most of the people sitting here don't remember the McCarthy hearings, don't remember the anti-communist madness of the 1950s. You can't, and I'm not going to raise my blood pressure about this. After I'm done, I'm not speaking about it ever again. But you can't suppress freedom of speech. It's the core of American democracy.
Sir.
Yeah, hi, I'm Peter Davis from Quechee, and this will be very short.
Okay.
Thank you. Almost everybody's left, so it doesn't matter. And the point of that is this is a very interesting session. It's clear the importance of what the board is doing, and it was interesting hearing your positions on key issues and so on. But there's hardly anybody here compared to the town of Hartford. So this is getting to very few voters. And my question, which is maybe going to embarrass me if I'm wrong, is I am unaware of anything that's put out by the town or local newspapers that goes in an organized way for each candidate with a little bit of background on you. What do you think are the key issues? What are your feelings on issues that have been identified like the 1% tax? Because people are completely blind. And I have to admit I'm a Quechee person, so I don't know everybody in White Plains. But I've never, excuse me, in Hartford. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Or Wilder, too. But
that's not a small town.
Yeah, I'm totally accustomed to having it be different. Every other place where I've lived, and I've lived in a lot of places, that there be an organized way of presenting the candidates. And even tonight, if people had been able, and there were a couple of pamphlets, which I appreciated, but it would have been nice to have something coming into this meeting to better formulate questions and have more people more informed to ask more informed questions. So I hope that that's something that the board will consider orchestrating in the future, and even the future before a few weeks from now. It would be great help to me and to other voters in Hartford.
Okay.
Thanks.
We'll recognize Mr. Flynn briefly.
I'm
Just
sorry.
comment.
As you know, I have to respond. This candidate night is specifically to provide that level of interaction, and almost every candidate up here has posted on the town listserv and on the Daily UV, which is the Upper Valley online news website. There were also candidate profiles in the Valley News about a month ago. So there's been enough information out there to have some sense of what sorts of questions you might want to ask these people. The other thing is that we will have a meeting on Saturday, and thank you, Michael, for recognizing me. We're going to have a meeting Saturday morning, 10 o'clock. There are going to be 3 public hearings on the charter changes, on the tax increment financing bond, and on the local option tax charter change, where all of those issues are going to be able to be thrashed out in public hearing fashion. Then we're going to break for lunch. The Otaquechee PTO will have their famous $5 luncheon: stew, soup, hot dog, chips, drink. And after a half an hour of that, we'll have a candidates roundtable where all the candidates are going to be up there, and we're going to have a whole list of questions for them to take up and discuss amongst themselves, so you'll be able to see them interacting as a board, as a group of people having a conversation. Given the limitations of the time frame of money, this is about the best we can do in terms of providing an opportunity for them to be seen and heard immediately before the election, which is 8 days from today. And all of you people in the audience here tonight are part of making great TV, because for everybody who showed up here tonight, and I counted, we had 135 people at the max. For every person that's in the audience, we know there are 4 or 5 people who are going to watch this on CATV. And so that means that fully half of the people who regularly show up, half of the 1,800 people who regularly show up to vote, will have seen all or part of this. And as the studio audience, you've been asking great questions, because a lot of the people who are here have enough background that they can frame these things. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome. Ms. White, you may have had some comment.
Yeah, my only comment, you finished out with it, FX. I did want to take a moment to thank the Town and School Meeting Committee for putting this together, as well as thanking CATV, because if you do watch any of the meetings, all the select board meetings, all the school board meetings, they're all available online, and they're also shown on public access. So I know my mom is watching, so you should get your friends and family to do that as well. So thank you, CATV and Town and School Meeting Committee.
I don't know if that answered your question, sir, but
No, I would just wonder whether, if it were better publicized, and I appreciate everything FX is saying, but 4 or 5 times, maybe you'd get more involvement and more participation if the things was laid in a user-friendly way, a little bit more in front of your public. And maybe not, but that's something that you ought to think about.
thank you, sir.
Sure.
Mr. Sells, and then we'll get to Ms. Foster.
Actually, I've got a kind of a question for the school side and then for the town. With the declining enrollments that we've been faced with over the years, and noticing that the last 2 years, on the budget, it's been $170,000 in sending schools that we've lost money on. And with the incoming kindergarten in the junior class, which was mentioned earlier tonight, we're going to continue to lose students. How, on one hand, kind of a two-part question, how do we entice keeping the students here? But to go kind of hand in hand with that, we've got a disastrous parking lot out back here and in front that's going to be $1 million, $2 million, who knows? Then on the town side, we've got Fairview Terrace, the water and sewer. We're looking at maybe what, $5 million, $4 million? So over the next couple of years, we're looking at $5, $6, $7, $8 million added to the budget. How are we going to get there to get these fixes in place so that we can attract more people into town?
All monthly payments. You're not gonna pay $7 million for that. It's gonna be based on.
I'm asking.
Anybody want to take that on?
Just
Dennis.
briefly, to respond to your question, Mike, in terms of the water and sewer, are you referring to the bond that's on the warrant for this coming up on March 2nd? There is I'm not sure if you are or not, but the separation of the stormwater and the sewage water in the downtown, is that what you're asking about?
Well, part of that and the fact that when you look at probably out of the course of the year, how many water main breaks are there in this town? And we're continuing to fix old water pipes. Ralph Winnie was brought up, Alvin Rick is another name who knows where, has a history of all these pipes and stuff. We're facing an infrastructure cost that's going to be astronomical for this town over the next, years there. Maybe then we'll all face with the water and sewer that we're covered. And we're faced with $6 or $7 million added to the town budget over the next 3, 4 years.
Yeah, well, I think that as far as the Fairview Terrace project goes, on our capital improvement plan, we have it is articulated that that's coming down the pike. I think it's in either 2017, 2018, one of those two. And if somebody knows 2017, in other words, next year, the plan is to bring forward a bond. And yes, that will be in the $3 to $4 million range. And that will be, that'll be probably on the warrant a week from tomorrow. And that's the plan for how to move forward with that project. And some of the sewer work that we're going to is currently on the warrant for a week from tomorrow, involves correcting some of that older infrastructure. So there's that way, and of course there's been a fairly strong focus articulated throughout this evening to
give focus towards our capital improvement plan and actually developing the fiscal discipline to be able to set this money aside. And that, so I think both of those strategies are there for us, and they will both be how we'll move forward as far as
Anybody else want to add to that? Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
So I can't, reasonably speak to a lot of the specifics you cited, but one thing I can point out is that, paving our roads with asphalt is an example of something that's not sustainable in the long term. I don't know. I know a lot of neat tricks about how to make things more sustainable. That one I have no idea. I'm a technology geek, and it's a huge challenge. Asphalt's a petroleum product. In the short term, we've got low oil prices, and I would, on the select board, be watching very carefully what happens to asphalt prices and make sure our public works is ready to take advantage of those should they come, so that we can maybe get ahead of some of this paving backlog that we have while the oil prices are low. And hopefully asphalt prices follow. I'm not sure how closely tied the markets are. But, we've got to think about beyond the next couple of years, though. The paving budget paving has been a huge point of contention in the budget. It's been a big challenge for every year I've showed up at a select board budget meeting. Paving's been, how do we pay for this? We're taking from the paving budget we don't have. And, as Chuck Wooster points out, this is another kind of failure in terms of resilience, right? If you don't keep up with your paving, the next time Irene hits, you get hit that much harder because, your dirt roads aren't crowned right, and the paving, things get washed away. You suffer a lot more damage. So, I don't have a clear answer on that one, but I know it's something that we're going to have to start thinking in the 5 to 10 to 20 year time frame about how are we going to deal with roads in this town. Is it concrete? Is it more dirt? Is it solar roadway? I don't know. Some crazy new technology. But we got to figure that out.
Anybody else? Ms. Walther, and then we'll get to Mr. Balsey. And okay, I guess we have a few more people who want to chime in on that. Go ahead.
Very, very quickly, the capital improvement plan is a very cool document, and you can't get it online right now, the latest version, but I was looking at it today. You can have it emailed to you, and you might really like going over it. It was really interesting. No? It's just not online yet. Tomorrow. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Lori. Lori emailed it to me today, and I had a chance to look over it. You'll like it. Go through and read it. It's interesting. It talks about our plan, and it's a worthy read.
Mr. DeBalzi.
Lori and her department deserve a lot of credit for creating that plan.
Mr. DeBalzi.
Just quickly, because there's a lot to Mike's question about the parking lots and declining enrollment, but it is something that I'm very proud of the current board and what they've done with facilities management here. 5 years ago when I began, they asked me to get an assessment of all the facilities in the whole district, and we did that. We had an engineering firm come in, and we did spend a little bit of money, but we got an assessment of everything that the community owns in the school system, and what it's worth and what it needs and how to maintain it and where there's going to be problems in the coming years. And I took that and developed a 25-year maintenance plan. And this board has insisted that I assess that plan a couple times a year. It's been a goal of theirs for the last 5 years to monitor that plan. Last year I dragged the entire board around. I think Mr. Christie drove us on a small school bus, and we went around to every school and we looked at the needs, and they saw it with their own 2 eyes, and they looked at the parking lots, and that is on the plan. This wasn't the year to float a bond for pavement, and we knew that going in, although I pushed it, and we weren't going to do that this year with all the Act 46 changes, but it's on our list to address. That's part of the reason why we couldn't do more than a 3% increase. We want to be very fiscally responsible to all of you. So we looked at that budget and we were very conservative. We said with 54 less students, that's approximately $850,000 in lost revenue. It wasn't the year to start increasing the budget. we need to be a little more nimble, we need to be a little bit more in line with our enrollment, so that we can be responsible to all of you. And then we can ask for a bond when it's time to pass a bond for infrastructure improvements or for facility improvements. Next year, we do have the addition to the high school bond is being paid off. Things are looking up, but this year was not the year to do that. But, you know, we have approximately $200,000 bond payment that won't have to be made after next year. So, you know, that the parking lots are on the list, and it will be brought up when we're planning for FY18's budget.
Thank you, Mr. Balsey.
Thank
Mr.
you.
North.
Yeah, and I've been talking to people, and just my own observation, dropping my daughters off, I'm very cognizant of the parking lot issue, and also how it can be perceived to people coming to visit the school, i.e., if you can't maintain your parking lot, how can you maintain educational quality for the students? So it is something that I'm very aware of, but again, you have to balance. There is no perfect time, but this was not definitely the right time to do it. And in terms of dealing with the declining enrollment, one of the ideas that I've been sort of floating is reaching out to local realtors, going on the website, seeing what the perception of the school system is, because we need to understand what the perception is, and then we can deal with changing that to make it, people understand the attributes. I mean, since I was appointed to the board, I had 2 people unsolicited who are in education tell me what a great student body we have, how it was a great pleasure to be in the school. And that's the kind of information we need to get out, because that's the kind of thing prospective parents would like to hear.
Thank you. Mrs. Foster, did you have a question? Mr. Briggs.
Hand me the microphone. Hand me the microphone.
No, any other questions? I mean, we have dwindling enrollment here in the room.
Yes, on this topic, I wanted to ask Lori regarding the school budget. What kind of an impact will it have on what the high school offers in terms of advanced placement classes? And then I'd like a follow-up.
As far as dropping enrollment?
No, the budget that we're being asked to vote on Tuesday.
I can't give you an exacting how that's going to affect advanced placement, because as far as the teachers that are...
Oh, microphone.
Because as far as like the teachers that are retiring, they have until March 15th to rescind that request. You know, they could be looking at their, 401s and 403Bs and whatever they have and saying, you know what, I just can't retire right now. So that may change the whole game plan. So that is the job, and I can let Tom, speak to that, because he is, the head of the personnel, and he is the person who is going to be shifting, around and posting positions that we need to repost.
This is probably one of the toughest things that I do, and I think the cuts will be treated like a surgeon with the scalpel. I'm looking at all the enrollments and all the classes across the entire district, every single teacher's class size, every single block of the day or hour of the day. So where there's areas that can be consolidated, that's what I'll be doing. But the last thing I want to do is do anything that's going to drive away enrollment or tuitioning students. So advanced placement classes, we're lucky here in Hartford. We have advanced placement in statistics, in calculus, in physics, in chemistry, and we have some really skilled staff to do that. So we don't want to do anything that jeopardizes those advanced placement classes, but we do need to consolidate. So where we can, we'll do it, and I think there's some areas where we can that won't affect that.
Okay, then my follow-up would be directed to Russell North, and that is, as an accountant, you understand how the money flows from the state to the town, how it flows out of the town to the state, and so forth. And we read today in the news, or 2 days ago, I guess, that the that the legislature is talking about buying down statewide property taxes, statewide school property taxes, which are the only property taxes that there are the statewide tax, buying down using a $20 million of surplus that's in the state education fund. So why wouldn't it be to our advantage as a town to vote the budget down and then gather again on Saturday the 27th and set a budget that takes into account the fact that the legislature has voted in mid-March to buy down the state tax rate and get out from under cuts that are obviously unpleasant.
I thought we had called an end to this, but anyway, that's a great question. I guess my concern with that strategy is you're relying on the legislature for a specific action. And there's talk of it. There's also talk of having a budget deficit, funding problems. So that, just because there's talk doesn't mean it's going to come true. And I guess I would be very concerned about taking the course of action you proposed with a large degree of uncertainty.
Right, but the downside would be to just vote for the budget that was presented originally. And the upside would be that we could say, oh my God, we don't have to cut so much, and we can still have our taxes actually go down, not up. That's potentially what the outcome could be.
Well, I'd like to respond to that. And with the idea that if you have, I mean, we have made significant cuts to this budget, and I would strongly urge and ask the tax payers and voters to vote for this budget, because we've done the hard work. And I think it's folly to vote it down and then propose that, oh, we're going to add stuff back in, because the time that we had that in our town, we had the largest turnout. The fire marshal probably should not have let as many people in as did that time. It was a very controversial time, and it really, there was a lot of bad blood that was created at that floor meeting. And I just don't want to see that happening, because there's going to be people who are in this town who say, you know, I voted this budget down, but I voted it down not because I didn't want it to go up, but because I wanted it to go down further. And then if it went up, I just think, I think that's not the prudent way to go.
All right. We are down to, I think, fewer than a third of the people who were originally here. So I want to thank you all for coming out and thank all of you who stayed for sticking with us to the bitter end. Have a good evening, and I hope to see most of you Saturday.